try our best to make sure that we see your questions and that they don't get lost as you type them in. So our focus today will be on new features in ArcGIS Pro, and we're going to have some demos as we look through that. But before we get started, we are going to have a look at the overall structure of today's webinar, just to give us some sort of overview. So we'll talk about some of the major themes of the release as a whole, and we're also going to break down some of the functional areas that have been improved in ArcGIS Pro 3.2. We'll also look at areas of data management, mapping and visualization, as well as analysis. And finally, we're going to look for productivity improvements or things that help you get your work done a bit easier or better as you work. So of course, we can't cover everything in the release, but we'll do our best to make sure we look at some of the key highlights. So just to get started, in terms of themes for ArcGIS Pro 3.2, we want to just make sure that people are aware that ArcMap is entering mature support starting in March 2024. So mature support, in case you might not know, basically means that within this period, there'll be no new legacy patches, no sorts of software updates or that kind of thing. So it's entering that kind of stage, and that stage ends around March 2026 to fulfill the full life cycle of ArcMap, which was every version has a 6-year life cycle. And after that, even though ArcMap will continue to live on, ArcGIS Pro is where all the development is happening. And to that end, Esri has taken the stance that to move all the remaining ArcMap equivalency items, meaning all the things that were in ArcMap that you didn't find in ArcGIS Pro, that's a major part of what's being ported within ArcGIS 3.2 to get you fully comfortable with working with ArcGIS Pro. And those are the things that were knocked out in this particular release. So administration and deployment is a big topic for people who work with large organizations. So if you're a GIS coordinator or admin and you need to deploy ArcGIS Pro to a bunch of users, maybe 100 or more, there's a lot of new application management settings at this release, and also trying to standardize this kind of workflows. In light of current events happening around the world, and also in terms of GIS, some new field types have been added to data structures within ArcGIS, and we're going to cover that in the data management section. And of course, we're still going to look at productivity and performance, since a lot of the items that have been looked at within this release are more part of like user requests. So as people have sent in user requests, Esri has tried to incorporate that into the new release. So if you follow ArcGIS ideas, there's a bit more than 120 ideas from ideas.arcgis.com. That's the ArcGIS idea site that have been implemented in this very release. So it's actually quite a big release in that sense. So we're going to kick off with our first functional area of data management, and we're going to talk about the new Generate Schema Report tool. So for a lot of us who've been working with ArcMap for a long time, there's been an add-in that hasn't been actually a supported add-in for ArcMap, known as X-ray for Arc Catalog. And basically, it allowed users to generate like a schema of the entire geodatabase. Now, it being not supported, it had some misgivings here and there. So basically, people in the idea site were clamoring for something like this to be added for ArcGIS Pro, and I'm glad to report that it has. So the Generate Schema tool basically allows users to generate a report of the scheme of the entire geodatabase. And this output is very useful for generating data models and data dictionaries. And we're going to look at that in a demo in just a few minutes. But I also want to mention that 3.2 is also supporting workflows similar to those implemented for ArcMap in editing non-versioned data. So the way this is done is by creating a single workspace, meaning that implemented edits against non-version data will not be written directly to the database. And that means you can discard edits and it won't commit those edits directly after you've started making your edits. And it's a setting that can be controlled and deployed by administrators to provide a consistent editing experience for users across the platform. There's also the new field types that have been added. So the new field types include date only, time only, and timestamp offset, as well as 64-bit object IDs. So some of these field types are self-explanatory. So for example, you've been able to capture time in terms of date time. So you have the date and the time. But now there's fields that will allow you to just capture date or just capture time. So those are a bit self-explanatory. But something like, let's say, the 64-bit object IDs, you might be wondering, what's that and how does it help me? So to give context, let me show you like a number that we're talking, one of the numbers we're talking about. So this is a huge number, obviously, but this is the kind of number that you wouldn't be able to store in ArcMap right now, or even ArcGIS Pro before 3.2. So this number is 18 quintillion, 446 quadrillion, 744 trillion, 073 billion, 709,551,615. So that's the amount, that's how big of a data set that 64-bit object IDs allows us to store. So you might be wondering why this is a big deal. For some of us, we are collecting data from many sensors, and these sensors are these sensors are giving us data every second, every millisecond, and so on and so forth. So previously, when we were having 32-bit object IDs, this is all we could store. We could only store 2,147,483,000 values. So if you had an object ID, you could only go from 1 to 2 billion. So past 2 billion, then you don't have object IDs, and now you have to either archive that in a separate data set and start a new one, or find some other way of storing data. So 64-bit IDs greatly expand the capacity of our geodatabases to store data in terms of capacity. So this is supported in the file geodatabase as well as enterprise geodatabases. And that is, and part as we continue into the world of AI and machine learning and sensors everywhere, this will allow us to move forward into that world with confidence, knowing that we can store the data as it comes. So having said that, we can jump into our first demo. So our first demo is basically, our first demo is going to be, we're going to look at the generating of the schema report. So let's switch over. Basically, you can see on the screen what we'll be looking at. We'll be looking at how we get the schema report, possible outputs, and we're going to explore some of those outputs. So let me just switch over to ArcGIS Pro. So I hope we can see Pro right there in front of us. And basically how we get to the schema report is right now I'm at a catalog window or catalog, I'm at the catalog window, and I'm going to have a look at some databases. So I've just opened this, and there's my what's new database here. So that's basically what your database is. I'm also going to look at some of the folders here, and you can see some folders and a geodatabase here at the bottom, a file geodatabase named area KS. And as I open the area KS, you can see there's a bunch of data sets in here. We have a parcel management feature data set with some feature classes in there. Same with the sewer system and some topology as well. And we have a table and other feature classes. So basically, we're going to try and generate a schema report from this. And all we need to do for that is actually just right click on the geodatabase itself. And you can go ahead and go to the export. And at the bottom, you'll see the generate schema report. So basically, this generates a schema, a report on the schema of the selected workspace. So as you can see, it comes up as a geoprocessing tool, meaning you rather, instead of right-clicking on the file geodatabase or the database connection that you have, in case you're using an enterprise geodatabase, you can actually just head on to analysis and actually just run this as a tool. So what you need to do is probably just create a space for it to to generate the output, and you can give it a name. So I'm going to call it area KS report. And here is a number of output formats that we have. We have, by default, we have XLSX, which is the new Excel. You have JSON format, HTML, and PDF. So I'm just going to pick all three of these and go ahead and run. So in terms of basically what we're going to do is we're going to generate the schema of this particular geodatabase without necessarily looking, not necessarily actually looking to the geodatabase. So you can see it's actually completed. And if I see my details here, I have 3 outputs generated. So I have my area KS report, XLSX, HTML, and a PDF. So I'm going to trend. I think I'll have to share my entire screen for this. So I'll just go ahead and do that. So that was C data. And you can see these have been generated just now. Let's start with the XLSX. So as you can see, we have we have a table of contents sheet. And for each one of these, there's a different sheet with information about it. So you can start off here. You can see the number of feature data sets we have. We have 2 feature data sets, 8 feature classes, 1 table, relationship classes, blah, blah, blah. And you can see the individual data sets now. So for example, if I say I'm looking at the sewer system, if I click on this, then you can see we now come to what particular items there are inside. We have the following feature classes: net junctions, points, and lines. If I click on a particular one, I can actually go back. I can actually go and see exactly what's inside that particular feature class. You can see the fields. You can see all the information about the particular feature class. And if you need to go back, you can go back to your table of contents. So each one of these is generated as an individual sheet showing information about the either the feature class you're looking at or the feature data set that you're looking at. And the same is generated this time, but in terms of a PDF. So if I open my PDF here, you can see the same thing. So this is more of a single page kind of application. So if I click on it, it jumps to where I need to be. just like we did, go to points, you can see the information, everything is laid out for you, and you're able to have a look at it in the PDF. And it's something you can share with somebody in case you're transferring data or sharing data with someone. So the same works for a HTML page. So you can actually share this with someone and tell them, like, this is the data that I have, and this is how it's arranged, and so on and so forth. So basically, everything laid out for you in a very concise manner in any format that you'd like to have. So basically, that allows us to, if in case we're trying to, let's say, compare schemas between two different geodatabases, this could come in as a very handy tool. If you need someone to create a geodatabase exactly like what you have, this could be a tool that you share with them. Now, at this particular point, it's sort of one way. It's from the geodatabase into the data dictionary, like we're looking at here. But the end goal is to have this kind of dictionary now be able to revert into a geodatabase itself, in the sense that in later formats, let's say in later versions, what's going to happen is you're going to have this, and you're going to be able to transform that into a geodatabase just by running a tool. So that's the idea behind this, is to take it towards that, have sort of a full circle moment. You can generate the data dictionary, and from the data dictionary, you can create a geodatabase. So, so we can head back to our presentation. And we can head back to that. So we've been able to look at how to generate a schema report. So let's go ahead and look at some functional areas where we're going to, in terms of mapping and visualization. So starting with the radio group layers, this is a new type of group layer. We're going to demo some of these, all of these ideas. But what I want to mention here is that this is a layer that allows you to have some sort of exclusive visibility for any layer within a particular group. So if you group layers and you want to see them individually within the group, then when you set this group type, as you click any layer, then that layer is the one that's displayed and all the others are turned off. So we're going to see that in a second. It'll make a bit more sense when you see it live. And that's something you could use to drive a different kind of, let's say, map series when you're printing. So sometimes you have a bunch of data sets and you want to print different themes out of these particular data sets. And each theme is related to a particular layer. You can actually use the radio button or the radio group layers to kind of fast track that kind of map series. So we're also going to see that. The thematic map series will allow you to focus on a single map extent, and you'll be basically able to go through each layer in your radio group layer. So even though each radio group layer stands on its own, you'll be able to sort of print them out together because they're in the same map, and you have a series created from that radio group layer. And that's something we're going to look into that. Maybe it'll make more sense once we have a look at that. We're also going to talk about printer margins and tiling lines. So basically, this is improved functionality, and the idea is just to give you a good experience of a good experience in terms of, let's say, print preview. We're also going to see how that works. And finally, we're also going to see how we can export the map series to different formats. So ideally, it's primarily been PDF, but now the following have been added: TIFF, PNG, and JPEG. And those are some of the exports that we'll be able to do. So that being said, we're going to switch back to ArcGIS Pro, and let's get back to Pro. So I hope we can see Pro now. So here we have a map, a world map. So basically, let me just close this. Basically, we have the world map, just a map of countries in the world and regions. And we have a group here. As you can see, this is a group. So this group has some layers within it. So we have the world cities, we have the world major rivers, the world major lakes, and so on and so forth. So this is how we are used to seeing our our groups. So what the radio group layer allows us to do is group it in a different way, in the sense that we can see one layer per time at a moment and in every moment. So you can do that by right-clicking on the group layer and coming to the group type and checking the radio button. So now, instead of having a checkbox like where you have multiple layers being seen at the same time, you can see individual layers at a time. So for example, you have the world cities. Now you can see the world major rivers, the world major lakes. We should have used something a bit better. You can see the lake here. The world regions, and so on and so forth. So you're able to move these through. And that way you're able to, like, you can look at every layer individually and and basically go through them. So that's not the only way you can actually change the type of grouping that you have. At the top here, remember, ArcGIS Pro has always been about interactivity and multiple ways of accessing information. So when you click on the group layer over here, you can see this tab, interactive tab, is launched here, and you can also change it through this particular point. So you can check back to checkbox, where now we're able to have everything at the same time, or you can go back to our radio as we had before. So as we mentioned, this leads into other things which we can, this leads into other things which can help us out as we work, which for example is, let's say, a thematic layout. So as you can see here, we have our layout here stretched out. We just have a layout created. And right now it's showing what we have on the map. But we could actually, clicking on the map series over here, you can see we have a thematic kind of map series, which is the new addition in 3.2. And you can see it's a series of pages that span a range of map themes. So if my theme was world cities, this is what I'd have out on my layout. But I can actually define this based on my group layer. So my group layer was world details. And I can go ahead and say, okay. And now you can see I have world cities here. And when I come to this, I have my world major rivers, and you can see this is dynamic as well. So basically picking up your whatever theme you're looking at, world major lakes as well, and world regions. So using this particular method, we are able to create a map series very quickly. All we need to do is just have them grouped out. Maybe have our radio, have our group layer group typed as a radio layer, and then we can include this in our map series, and we can print these out. So speaking of printing, let's say looking at the print menu, like we've been talking about it in the slides before. So let's look at the print layout here. You can see we have a print layout here. Let me just bring it down so that we can see some more information. So something we've always had is the ability to show printer margins. So I'm just going to pick something here, say letter. We've always been able to see printer margins. I don't know if you can see, it's a bit faint, but you can see the printer margins here, like showing you the margins of what's able to, where the page is going to fit. And in cases like this, where you have like a large format and you're going to need a bunch of, a bunch of them, a bunch of maps together, then in that case, you'll need to tile your printouts. So this is what one tile will look like. Now, what we've been able to, let's say, what is new in this particular release is the ability to show tiling lines. So this allows us now to see, like, okay, where is an overlap going to happen? And that can help you in terms of where do you want your labels to land. You can change a few things based on this. So you can set up your page and actually just look through and see how the tiling lines will tell you exactly what will land where. And that way you're able to work with your print guide. So moving on into the exporting of layouts, let's look at some of the presets that we have. So you can see the presets over here. And let me just expand. So as we mentioned, it was primarily, and it has always been primarily PDF, but now, and of course, if you picked something that doesn't exist, so for example, GIF. So a GIF doesn't exist. That doesn't exist right now. But for all of these that have been, let's say, standardized, so for JPEG, now we have your JPEG settings at the bottom there. You have your TIFF, and you have your TIFF settings, and you have your PNG settings. Now, I don't want to say that this was never possible. It was, but you had to do some sort of scripting to get that, to get the PNGs, to get the JPEGs, to get the TIFFs. So what's happened is, in this release, rather than you going out of your way to do that, ArcGIS Pro 3.2 has just put it directly into the UI, and you're able to do it for yourself easily without needing to know any Python or any type of scripting for that matter. So with that in mind, I'm going to head back to our slides so that we can continue looking at the release improvements. So let me just scoot back onto our slideshow. So we've been able to basically see the enhancements that have been done, the mapping enhancements. So now we're going to go ahead and move into functional areas in terms of analysis. So basically, 3.2 release is introducing a redesigned field map parameter. So basically, when you're doing, let's say when you're doing something like a join, and you're doing, you're comparing two different fields. Now the field map is going to look a lot different. It's going to be a lot more granular in the ways you can work with different field properties. And that's what we are seeing in this slide over here. And also as well as the processing extent. So we are going to make the field mapping and extent setting a lot more intuitive and a lot more efficient. Or not we are going to, it's already done in the 3.2 release. Something else that's starting in ArcGIS Pro 3.2, you can now create multi-series charts. So basically you can take a regular chart and make it into multiple, like one for each value in something we're calling the split by field. So we're going to look at what this looks like in a demo in a short moment. But before we jump into that, I also want to mention about the surface profile charts. So the 3.2 release is also introducing, sorry, not going to introduce, but it's already introduced surface profile charts for raster layers. It's a new type of profile chart that allows you to visualize distribution of variables like elevation or surface temperature over distance. So without further ado, let's jump back into ArcGIS Pro. I know there's a lot of jumping back and forth, but I hope that you bear with us as we look through a number of these changes. So let's jump back to Pro. And basically, what we are looking at is, let's start off with, we have our data set here for world cities. And ideally, we've been able to create charts just basically by coming to the create chart and let's say make a histogram. So here I've created a histogram here for population ranking. So you can see in fact, let me just make it a tab on its own. We have a distribution for population ranking. So basically, within the map, let's go back to the map. Within the map, just to explain it a bit, we have world cities. And for each of these world cities, there's a population ranking. So for example, population rank 1 is 5 million and greater. And we have other rankings. 3, you see 500,000 to 999,000. So different rankings in terms of population. So we have a histogram here. Basically what we did was we took the population ranking and then distributed that in terms of, we're trying to see within, like on a global scale, what's the mean? You see here we have the mean. What's the mean in terms of population ranking for cities? And you can see standard deviation, and just to see the distribution, the normal distribution curve. So what's new? This has always been available, and you're able to do that in ArcGIS Pro. But what's not been possible is being able to create a multi-series chart. So a multi-series chart would be a chart based on the same chart, but now based on smaller kind of, let's say, parameters. So in this case, this is for a global scale. Now you could actually, since we're looking at this particular map here, if you look at our pop-up, we have the city name, we have the admin name, blah, blah, blah. So we also have country name. So if I wanted to see the distribution of cities, population rank in cities in each country, then I could split by country name. So as you can see, there's a number of values here. So I'm picking that because it has multiple values. So here you can see now what it has done. It's generated the same kind of chart for every country over here. So for example, the one we're looking at here is the United States. We could look at something else. You can see here we have Spain and so on and so forth. So basically, you're able to generate these graphs for every country. Now, this is the same, it's basically the same chart, but what you're showing is every country, the same kind of distribution. So if you can deal with the larger scale or the smaller scale. So how we got to see this chart is, I have to mention that ideally this is what will happen. You'll see something like this, which is basically all the charts, but you can see previews if you allow the preview chart. So that's how I get to this particular point. So all you need to get something like this done is basically your distribution, your split by field, and you're able to create a number of charts. Now, what's really fascinating about this as well is how you can share this with people. So there's, as you can see now, as we mentioned earlier, ArcGIS Pro is a very interactive kind of software. So if I click on something, you'll see a context menu at the top here. So you can see, if I click on the chart, you can see the menu at the top here, and we have something called capture to clipboard. So you can see the chart has been captured to the clipboard, and in the event I want to paste this somewhere else, I can actually just go ahead and paste it anywhere. So, and the same kind of export is available. Like you can export it as a graphic, as a table, or capture to clipboard. So you're able to copy this and paste it anywhere on your PowerPoint, on your Word document as you're creating a report, you're able to do each and every one of these things. You're able to go ahead and share these. So that is creating a multi-series charts. So let's look at surface profile charts. So here I have a raster image. So which is basically SRTM for Kenya, 30 meters. And basically I want to do something like I want to visualize elevation over a certain distance. So in the same way that we're able to create a chart for the multi-series charts, I can do the same thing here and basically right click on this and actually come to create chart. And we have the surface profile, and that's what we're calling the surface profile chart. So if I click on this, so I'm going to put it in here so that we can see the map as well. All I need to do is provide the context or what you're looking for in terms of the profile. So you could be like, so once you do that, then you're able to actually see the elevation in terms of a profile chart. So in this case, our distance is in terms of degrees and not necessarily kilometers or meters, but you can see different, you can see the elevation as it happens, the profile. So the kind of, like the way we used to have like you can have like an elevation profile, the same thing over here, profile chart. And it's a bit intuitive. You're able to label data points, although now this will be a bit much. So I'll skip that there. And you're able to see your different statistics within the chart. So that's another chart that's been introduced within the ArcGIS 3.2 release. And you're able to see this kind of chart. You're able to generate this kind of chart for yourself as well. So finally, we're going to look at, finally, in this particular demo section, we're going to look at the fields in terms of how you can the field mapping in terms of analysis and tools. So I'm going to open my tools here. Let me just keep that going. And I have a bunch of tools here I want to use. I want to use the spatial join. So I might actually want to use that on something else. So if said I was doing some sort of a field mapping and joining features within, joining two types of features. Let's say I'm just going to say I'm joining two different types of features. No, normally your field mapping experience was a bit different. So you can see here we have a very detailed field mapping experience. So you can see once you click on something, you're able to see also all sorts of information. You weren't able to see this in previous releases. Like if you tried to field map, all you would see is pretty much the columns. But now we have the field name, we have everything around here. You can do a search for something else you're trying to match it to, and so on and so forth. So that's what we're talking about when we meant field properties. And the same thing in terms of environments. When you're talking about the X and Y extent, we have something you can fill in here, which is a bit more detailed. You can also make your different variables using each one of the variable parameters using each one of the icons at the top here. So having done that, let's jump back into our presentation. As we come towards, let's jump back into our presentation as we come back towards the end of our presentation. So let's jump back to the presentation. So we've been able to see quite a bit of this. And yes, actually view the multi-series charts and discuss about that. So, sorry, think I skipped a bit too fast. So let's talk about productivity enhancements in ArcGIS Pro 3.2. So basically, ArcGIS is built to sort of help you work easier or faster. So we'll be talking about some new functionalities in terms of helping people be better in terms of productivity. And some of the favorites that we are looking at is, some of the favorites we're looking at are the geoprocessing tools and being able to toggle between full data set, filtered data, and highlighted records. We're going to see that in a short while. Also being able to do an auto apply on symbology. It'll make a bit more sense when we actually have a look at that, as well as spatial filtering of portal and ArcGIS Living Atlas content. So let's just jump into that immediately and see how that works. So going back to our ArcGIS Pro. So we're going to go ahead and let me just close this. We're going to go ahead and look at our geoprocessing tools. I'll just head back to our map here, and you can have some geoprocessing tools. So let's assume we want to do something like a buffer for each one of these cities. So we have our input features and output feature class, and basically how the buffer tool works. Let me just standardize that. So normally, if you want to do a buffer for a particular item, you'd and you want to, for a selection of items, you might go ahead and select something within the not necessarily the attribute table. You might do a select on the map, so on and so forth. So when you pick up, let's say, world cities, you can see now it's telling you that, oh, okay, we're using the selected records, and the selected records are 1,940. So I can choose to do that, or I can toggle it off and say that I'm doing a buffer for all the cities. So if I only want to use the selected records, then I toggle it on. If I want to use all of them, I toggle it off. Now, what's even better is sometimes you have a selection and then you want to do a selection inside a selection. So for example, say pick these, and actually, so you can see this is a selection within a selection. And if you've noticed, you can see the highlighted records here have changed. So it's noticing the selection within the selection. And even toggling on and off doesn't remove the selections themselves. So that's something that we feel is a good improvement in terms of like not stopping what you're doing, but allowing you the flexibility to either use the selected records you want or the selection within the selection, and allowing you to basically see all these options that you have. So I'm going to move to another enhancement that we can talk about. So I'm going to uncheck this and close this, and I'm going to move on to our beginning map here. So we had our world regions, and anytime you want to change an item, ideally you'd probably click on the symbol itself, and you'd get the symbology pane here where you can change the properties. And most of the time, if you want to change, for example, let's say if you want to change Northern Africa and we want to make it just for demo purposes, we want to make it this color. This looks like dark brown. You change it and you have a look at the preview there, and then you apply. So in this improvement for 3.0, we have the same thing here. We have an auto apply toggle button. So now when I say I'm auto applying, I can see it immediately. So I can do my changes really quick. I don't have to like look at a preview and then apply. you can make it almost immediate. The change can be immediate as you work on what you're doing. And if you don't like that, then you can always uncheck it. And of course, you can always go back to what you had previously by doing the undo button. And the good thing about this toggle button is that it remembers. So the next time, like you can see here, if I did it as auto apply, and let's say I changed something, and then I closed this, then I came to my different different symbology that I wanted to work with, the auto apply remembers the last setting you put it as. So you can always go back and work with exactly what you wanted. So finally, we're going to have a look at spatial filtering. And now this applies to when you're looking for information about particular items from the portal or from ArcGIS Online. So we're going to have a look at the Living Atlas. Basically, you can see when you go to Living Atlas, you have a bunch of data sets there. You can now filter these data sets based on different things like regions. So you can say that I only want, something for Cote d'Ivoire. And you can see basically it filters that by the region. You can go ahead and say you want something by a particular map extent, by the particular map extent right now. And you can tag these things in together. So you can see it's this map extent and only Cote d'Ivoire. And of course, you can clear the filter. So basically making your search easier within this particular context. So let's head back to our slides. We're getting to the final bit. So we've had a look at these productivity highlights. So the final thing we're going to look at is keyboard shortcuts. So some of us are basically, we are very used to shortcuts, especially people who use, let's say, touchpads and that sort of thing. So maybe they're very hands-on. They're not very mousy. So basically we have what we call the keyboard shortcuts dialog box. Now the shortcuts have always been there, but what we're going to look at is some of the changes within the shortcuts dialog box. So basically we'll be able to search for shortcuts by command name or keystroke. So you can see like, okay, the command names I want to copy. I can find something by searching the dialog box. Can go ahead and also browse to commands which you want to add shortcuts. You can also assign different keystrokes for existing shortcuts, and you can turn off, delete, or rest shortcuts, or reset. Actually, that should be reset. Sorry, that should be reset shortcuts. So let's jump back into that and see that for our final demo. This is our final demo as we come to a close. So let's jump back into Pro. And basically, how do we get to the shortcuts? So there's a number of ways to get to the shortcuts menu. You can, or dialog box, you can come to help, and within help, you can see shortcuts. You can also come to the command search here using a shortcut. That's funny, Alt Q. So if you go to Alt Q, you can find, it will open this particular search box at the top, and you can type in shortcuts. Or as you can see, when I hover, you can see, you can also just press F12. So you can get a shortcut to the shortcuts dialog. If that's not Inception, I don't know what that is. So here's our keyboard shortcuts dialog, and you can see there's different contexts in which you can have a shortcut. So there's global kind of shortcuts. So these are shortcuts that work for across the organization, not the organization, the application. But then there's also context kind of shortcuts. So for example, As you can see, when the shortcuts dialog opened, it opened at this particular point. Let me just do that again so that you can see. You can see catalog is highlighted here. That's what I'm actually looking at. So when I press, I'm going to press F12. So I press F12. So a shortcut, I'm able to see the shortcut for this particular context. So within catalog shortcuts that I have. Now these are what I think they call them off the shelf, like they are default shortcuts, but you can add a new shortcut for yourself. So depending on any kind of command you want, you can just add and make a shortcut out of that. But you can also see the shortcuts that currently exist. So a lot of us might not necessarily be interested in creating shortcuts, but maybe you want to look at a shortcut that exists. So within here, you can see that, okay, if I press Control-Shift-C, then I'll open a folder connection. So if I do that, so of course you can't see me pressing here, but believe that I'm doing that. Control-Shift-C, I open something of that sort. And as we mentioned, it's contextual. So if I come to map and then I try open F12, so F12 shortcuts, you can see now the shortcuts that appear are the ones for mapping. So if I had Control-Shift-C in a different context, it doesn't mean the same as within this context. So ideally, people try and avoid that so that you don't have conflicting ideas. But you'll notice something about, so for example, you'll notice that for each particular context you're in, you have shortcuts that you can work with. So as we mentioned earlier, you can search for these shortcuts by looking at the keystrokes. So if I say control, so let me say like I want to control S. So globally, control S means I save my project. So that's what control S means. So you could add a shortcut and say, that control something else does, gets into a different kind of, does a different sort of thing. You could also remove a particular, maybe you're used to doing a particular key combination. And for example, you don't want to do Alt-T, you don't want it to go to XY. So you can actually go ahead and remove that. You can actually remove that and go back. So as we mentioned still, these also work in the context of your layout. So within the layout, if I go back to my context, to my shortcuts, you can see now this is layout. And these are the shortcuts that you can use for each one of the commands that you want. So for example, activate Q. So I'm on this particular layout. If I press Q, now I'm within the map. Now I can zoom in and out and so on and so forth. But then I press Q again, I deactivate. So basically what the shortcuts dialog box is about is trying to give you latitude in terms of controlling how you work with your data and how you relate with your keyboard and your mouse in terms of accessing commands. You don't necessarily have to, maybe use a mouse and come to the tabs here, the ribbon. You can actually use your keyboard and do all sorts of commands or using shortcuts. So let's head back to our presentation to wrap this up. So back to our presentation. So we've looked at a number of things, but of course, we weren't able to exactly look at everything. So we've just managed to look at maybe, let's say, our favorites in terms of what we thought was most enticing for a lot of people to see. So in case you want to find out more, there's links to resources. So if you go to the ArcGIS Pro help, there's a what's new in ArcGIS Pro 3.2. So just on the help within the application, you can go to what's new in ArcGIS Pro 3.2, and you can get an overview of everything that is new in the release. You can also go to the ArcGIS For those of us who are still in, let's say, ArcMap, who are still using ArcMap, you might, just in case you want to see what's good for you on the other side, you can actually take a look at the migrate from ArcMap to ArcGIS Pro resources page, and there should be some very helpful materials for you. There's also what we call ArcGIS Pro Shorts, and it's a project that basically gives you short form content, like 1-minute videos that showcase tips, tricks, and best practices when working with ArcGIS Pro that come directly from the Esri product team. You can find that on YouTube or the media page for ArcGIS. Finally, we also have some resources for people who want to continue learning. That's the ArcGIS Pro tips and tricks Esri training video. You can have a look at that. If you go to our training site, you can also look at ArcGIS Pro Fundamentals. It's a learning plan showing you information about how you can learn more about ArcGIS Pro. For those who need more hands-on sort of learning, Esri Eastern Africa provides various instructor-led courses, including ArcGIS Pro Essential Workflows. And that should really get you into the scheme of things working with ArcGIS Pro. For those of us who are contemplating migrating, and we highly encourage you to contemplate migrating from ArcMap to ArcGIS Pro, we have an instructor-led course on how you can do the migration and how you can get people up to speed working with ArcGIS Pro. Finally, for the people who've been working with ArcGIS Pro and they want to get some more information in core functionalities within ArcGIS Pro, we have the Creating and Editing Data with ArcGIS Pro instructor-led course. And that should allow you to enhance your existing workflows. We encourage you all to visit ideas.arcgis.com. I don't know if I've mentioned this to you, but over 100 ideas from that site have been implemented in this particular release of ArcGIS Pro 3.2. So if you're having a problem with something and you'd like it fixed, this is the best way to get it done. Mention it on this particular site, and the product team will get on it and start working on it. So thank you for bearing with us over this period. I hope it wasn't too fast or abstract, but thank you for bearing with us. And in case there are any questions, I guess we could go through them